não vou estar aqui no fim, mas não queria deixar de dar início a esta sessão, que é a última deste encontro, marcando mais uma vez uma leitura da Cinemateca. Por um lado, um agradecimento, antes de mais nada, ao Arquivo Municipal, à Videoteca e a todas as pessoas da organização, vou dizer isto em geral, que nos propuseram esta iniciativa. E, por outro lado, dizer que, como disse no princípio, para nós isto foi um encontro natural, tendo em conta a pergunta que subjaz a estas sessões, o que é o arquivo, e que é muito bom para a Cinemateca albergar esta iniciativa, que penso que está a correr muito bem. Agradecer a todos os participantes, dizer que foram e são sempre muito bem-vindos na Cinemateca e que, obviamente, independentemente do futuro deste encontro, que é uma iniciativa da Videoteca, que a Cinemateca prosseguirá com esta reflexão e que certamente havemos de fazer outras coisas em conjunto, porque, como disse também no princípio, esta reflexão já não é entendida por nós como um tema possível para uma coisa pontual, é pura e simplesmente uma reflexão permanente que hoje todos nós, nestas instituições que albergam arquivos ou que trabalham com eles, têm que seguir. Obrigado a todos, obrigado a vocês e obrigado aos participantes estrangeiros. Thank you, Jonathan Beller, today especially. Welcome to the Cinemateca again, and thank you for your participation. And we will go on with this discussion in the future. But this is mostly welcome at the Cinemateca. This is our problem too, to discuss what is an archive. Thank you. Inês.
Sim. Obrigada, José Manel. Obrigada a todos por terem vindo. Eu vou-me sentar, porque decidimos fazer hoje, começar logo pelas apresentações, e vai ser uma sessão com vários participantes e prefiro já introduzi-los a todos e explicar um bocadinho o que é que vai acontecer, para depois deixar correr a sessão por si. Começo por agradecer mais uma vez à Cinemateca ter aceitado a nossa proposta e podermos estar aqui hoje, e quero agradecer já no final do ciclo especialmente aos projecionistas que têm feito um trabalho de grande rigor e que nos têm proporcionado sessões muito boas, com muita qualidade, sempre rigorosas. É muito bom estar nesta casa, também por causa de vocês. Hoje vamos falar do arquivo enquanto lugar de ordem, o que exige falar tanto da ordem que organiza o arquivo, como da ordem que o arquivo impõe às coisas, ao mundo. É uma continuação da discussão que começámos a ter ontem, onde mais diretamente abordámos os campos cegos do arquivo. Vamos continuar a pensar sobre os limites do arquivo e do cinema, e vamos fazer isso através das projeções. Vamos projetar 3 objetos no início desta sessão, e reflexão que depois é continuada nas várias intervenções que vamos ter aqui até às 9. São experiências, objetos, reflexões que trabalham para expandir e problematizar esses limites, os limites do arquivo. O Nuno Lisboa, programador, diretor do Docs Kingdom, foi programador convidado do Flaherty Film Seminar o ano passado, tem trabalhado com os filmes que vamos ver e vai abordar as questões que este ciclo coloca a partir desses filmes, logo a seguir à projeção. Depois vai estar cá o Pedro Neves Marques, que em 2015, com a Mariana Silva, lançou a plataforma, ou criou a plataforma Inhabitants. Entra depois a Lara Baladi, via Skype. É uma artista, faz parte do conselho da Arab Image Foundation e vem falar aqui dos arquivos que está a constituir online com imagens de Tahir. No fim, depois entra a Femke Sneltin, também via Skype, do coletivo Constant, de Bruxelas, que vem falar do trabalho deste coletivo, que trabalha numa zona que cruza a arte, a tecnologia, os média, e vem falar especificamente das ferramentas que este coletivo está a desenvolver para o desenho de um arquivo ativo. Cada um deles apresentará o seu trabalho e por isso a minha apresentação agora aqui é bastante breve. No final, o Jonathan Beller vai fechar o laboratório com uma conferência. Agradecemos muito ele ter vindo, é a primeira vez que vem a Portugal, dos Estados Unidos. O Jonathan dá aulas no Pratt Institute, tem feito propostas revolucionárias no campo do estudo dos média e também do cinema no seu sentido mais lato. É autor de The Cinematic Mode of Production, por exemplo, estudou o cinema filipino, tem trabalhado mais recentemente na zona de uma teoria feminista dos média e um dos seus últimos livros chama-se Message is Murder. Boa sessão, já nos encontramos a seguir à projeção.
And take care of business, as Elvis Presley would say. And you certainly have to take care of business, and you can't let all this tyranny get you down and stop you from living a life. But you've got to understand historically, when corruption builds to this level, it brings down civilizations and horrible tragedies happen. And tyranny is a norm in history, not an exception. And we've got a really bad batch of tyranny cooking up in the kitchen. And it needs to be thrown out. And so...
The man is already dead. They cuffing him. They cuffing him. I got everything on camera. From the time it started and everything. Oh my God. They just killed him, y'all. He just dead. This is just like, I don't even know what to do. Oh my God. He's still holding his gun out. The man is dead.
America is too disparate, it's too regionalized, and it will fall apart. Because the American people have never fought for their liberty except once, and haven't fought since. They don't deserve it, and that's why they don't have it. So let's talk about some good news. Matriarchy, that's good news, where all sexes celebrate their differences.
Bom, antes de tudo sobre os filmes, eu gostaria talvez de desafiar o Jonathan Beller para depois dizer alguma coisa sobre este programa e sobre estes 3 filmes que, de alguma forma, e nos seus próprios termos, cada um deles é um programa em si. Isto é, enfim, são filmes sobre o ecrã, parece-me, de alguma forma. São filmes que apresentam, cada um por si, programas de investigação e de organização de informação, de discursos e de imagens. Nós partilhamos a admiração e o interesse por um grande autor que escreveu em português também, apesar de ser checo de nascimento, mas ensinou muitos anos no Brasil, e que é citado no primeiro filme que vimos, chamado Willem Flusser, e que tem um livro, pelo menos, editado e, penso eu, escrito em português. Eu não consegui confirmar porque não encontrei a minha cópia, e, na verdade, é um livro que está inexplicavelmente esgotado há vários anos em Portugal, chamado Ensaio sobre a Fotografia. E, portanto, é um autor que desenvolve uma reflexão sobre isso mesmo, sobre essa ideia de programa, não exclusivamente neste sentido, que eu julgo que estamos aqui a pensar desde já, muito concreto, da seleção e ordenamento de filmes numa sessão. Vai um pouco mais além disso e desenvolve uma reflexão sobre aquilo que ele descreve como o mundo em que vivemos, o mundo de imagens técnicas. E parece-me, de facto, que o primeiro filme apresenta isso de uma forma clara, e, nomeadamente, essa convivência conflituosa, digamos, entre a palavra escrita, a palavra dita e a imagem, que convivem e lutam entre si neste ecrã. É um filme que apresenta, parece, enfim, o próprio filme, mas também aquilo que está antes e depois do filme. Víamos aqui neste canto, se não me engano, o mapa do rendering da imagem, do som, enfim, e esse conflito, enfim, é claro na própria dificuldade em legendar este filme.
não é? Que é impossível de uma certa maneira. Enfim, o segundo filme do Louis Anderson, o primeiro filme eu não o conhecia, o segundo filme do Louis Anderson foi programado na última edição do Doc's Kingdom, que é um seminário de cinema documental, que eu a seguir gostaria de descrever algumas características. E parece-me que é um filme interessante na forma como trabalha sobre o anacronismo, sem necessariamente apresentar uma narrativa fechada que liga acontecimentos contemporâneos com uma história de discriminação e escravatura. Eu sei que este filme teve uma exibição muito problemática em Nova Iorque, quando foi estreado, e que o próprio filme foi modificado depois dessa primeira projeção. Aquilo que nós vemos aqui num ecrã negro, nomeadamente o tiroteio propriamente dito, não era um ecrã negro quando foi mostrado pela primeira vez. E segundo sei, não estava lá, foi uma discussão muito acesa dessa estreia mundial do filme, e agravada pelo facto de o realizador, de alguma forma, ser demasiado branco, não é? O Louis Anderson é inglês, é britânico, mas continua ainda hoje a trabalhar no Haiti em particular e, enfim, é alguém que me parece que é interessante acompanhar. O filme do Dominique ganhou, parece-me que é talvez o mais problemático ou o mais perturbador desta sessão. De alguma forma, como os outros dois, também trabalha sobre aquilo que é a lógica do programa, e em particular do algoritmo, quer dizer, o Jonathan falará muito melhor sobre isso a seguir, e parece-me que aqui, enfim, de alguma forma, é uma playlist, não é? Quer dizer, de alguma forma este filme podia ser feito por qualquer um de nós com um único clique, não é? E o YouTube, de alguma forma, vai sugerindo a partir dos seus algoritmos aquilo que faz sentido e é pertinente ver a seguir, mas claro que de alguma forma procura esgotar esse programa pela acumulação e pela exaustão da sequência. O Dominique Cagnon foi também programado no Doc's Kingdom há 2 anos, no contexto de um programa chamado O Fim da Natureza. Este filme não foi mostrado um outro bastante mais problemático, chamado Of the North, e que, portanto, que reapropria um título de um filme do Robert Flaherty, e foi também programado no contexto do seminário Flaherty, que se realiza há 64 anos nos Estados Unidos, anualmente. Bom, e essa programação foi, sim, altamente problemática. Não é? Eu sofri bastante com isso, com a insistência na defesa daquilo que é o princípio de um seminário de cinema com características particulares. É preciso dizer que o seminário Flaherty nos Estados Unidos é a fonte inspiradora do Doc's Kingdom em Portugal, que foi fundado, o Doc's Kingdom, pelo diretor desta casa, o José Manuel Costa, porque ele foi, de facto, em 1979 ao seminário Flaherty, e a experiência foi de tal forma marcante que 20 anos depois consegue finalmente criar em Portugal, com um conjunto de pessoas, na APRDOC, a Associação Portuguesa do Documentário, esse espaço de debate e discussão que é o seminário.
Eu vou só deixar, eu não vou mostrar nenhum filme, vou só deixar a página do canal aqui, para vocês terem uma ideia. Então, o Nuno, no último Doc's Kingdom, convidou-nos, a mim e à Mariana, com quem faço este projeto, para participar como os realizadores, dentro do grupo de realizadores convidados, e foi bastante interessante. E penso, e tu me corrigirás também, que tenha vindo também numa minissérie que nós fizemos há 1 ano e meio, talvez, sim, que teve a ver com a ideia de fazer a exploração e prospecção por petróleo em Portugal, que há uma semana houve um protesto aqui em Lisboa, que são 5 episódios, cada um mais ou menos de 5 minutos, mas também me corrigirás de onde veio também o convite e tudo mais. E nós mostrámos lá esses, mostrámos outros. O projeto começou em 2015 em Nova Iorque, daí também é maioritariamente estar em inglês, apesar de, nesse caso, ter sido em português, essa série. E nós postamos regularmente produções novas, muitas delas nossas. Felizmente, porque estamos financeiramente mais à vontade do que no início, estamos mais interessados neste momento, aliás, em transformar o projeto também numa produtora e distribuidora. A primeira oportunidade que tivemos nesse sentido foi trabalhar com a Filipa César e com o Louis Anderson, que vocês viram um dos filmes, que fizeram um episódio. Os episódios saem, infelizmente, com uma regularidade ambígua e complicada, mas tem a ver com questões de produção e tudo mais. Como podem ver, temos conseguido produzir bastantes. Que veio no seguimento, este projeto que convidámos a Filipa e o Louis veio de uma série de conversas que a Filipa organizou em Guimarães, no centro Vila Flor, penso eu, se não estou em erro neste momento. Tinha a ver precisamente com a questão do arquivo, e vindo muito do trabalho da Filipa. E a Filipa conversou connosco a certo ponto, ok, como é que podemos traduzir estas conversas em filme, de alguma maneira, e foi esse um pouco o desafio que surgiu, e a Filipa e o Louis, que eram dos participantes, acabaram por produzir conceber este curto de filme para nós. E mais recentemente trabalhámos com 2 cineastas por quem eu tenho uma grande estima nos Estados Unidos, que é o Adam e o Zach Khalil, que são indígenas norte-americanos, Ojibwe, e que têm feito muito trabalho também sobre o que é o tipo de as expectativas de uma cinematografia Native American, e desconstroem-na de um modo que me parece muito interessante. E sei que o Adam, pelo menos, teve questões muito grandes em relação ao filme do Dominic, do Flaherty. Mas pronto, também convido a verem. Acho que é um filme muito interessante, que ficámos muito felizes com isto, porque acabou por ir para Sundance este ano, e para nós foi assim incrível ter produzido um filme que acabou em Sundance. O Inhabitants, quer dizer, surgiu de uma vontade de uma atenção a certas linguagens que cada vez vemos mais na internet, formatos de edição ou de filmagem, que são muito específicos ao formato online, na verdade. Não só em termos da duração, dos planos, da narrativa, da maneira de escrever guiões, e, por exemplo, muito ao nível jornalístico, é uma coisa que inicialmente estávamos muito interessados, quanto o The Guardian, New York Times ou a Vice, como é que eles concebem os seus próprios géneros cinematográficos ou videográficos, e como é que isso, ou então estando a olhar para vídeos amadores online, enquanto técnicas, ou própria palestra ou vídeo de palestra, enquanto um formato cinematográfico, não é? Por muito simples que seja, aparentemente. E trabalhar isso a partir do nosso conhecimento e experiência de filme experimental e de filme de artista, e como é que esses tipos de linguagens podiam ser contaminadas também, de certa maneira. Eu não sei se vocês têm alguma questão que queiram colocar em relação ao projeto, porque talvez seja mais fácil eu também falar um pouco a partir daí.
Vamos ter mais 2 que já estão a tentar ligar. Vamos ter mais 2 pessoas, ligação Skype.
Okay.
Não sei se tu conheces os projetos, a Lara Baladi, que está a construir um arquivo para Tahrir, para a praça de imagens amadoras, que é uma oferta online que vai recebendo imagens, e também o coletivo Constant, que está a desenvolver vários projetos na zona de contato entre a arte e a tecnologia, e encontrar ferramentas para possibilitar outras maneiras de circular pela informação online. Eu não sei se tu queres falar de como é que vocês se posicionam, em relação ao online, ou seja, em relação às questões de pesquisa, de ordenamento da informação, tal como, não é? Porque entram numa estrutura que existe. E se calhar perceber um bocadinho, gostava de perceber um bocadinho melhor a motivação para o início do projeto, o que é que vos fez iniciar esta plataforma?
Começando pelo fim, quer dizer, tanto eu como no caso da Mariana, ambos temos práticas artísticas e, no meu caso, também mais de filme, muito específicas, mas havia quando... Na verdade, surgiu de um convite de colaboração em Nova Iorque, a certo ponto, em que nos convidaram para fazermos um trabalho juntos. E foi interessante, mas também foi muito óbvio para nós que havia uma série de questões a nível político, digamos, que nos interessavam e que nos fugiam, digamos, às nossas pesquisas individuais. E isso ao mesmo tempo que estávamos muito interessados no espaço online, na possibilidade de distribuição livre. Por exemplo, os vídeos são gratuitos, as pessoas podem usar à vontade, têm vindo a ser incluídos em diferentes programas. Uma coisa que nós pedimos normalmente é que nos contactem, só para a gente saber onde é que eles andam, minimamente. Mas vem muito de uma vontade de expressão, honestamente, de poder abordar questões que de outro modo não faríamos. E também de ir à procura e de entrar em conversa com diferentes grupos que também não faríamos de outra maneira. Por exemplo, no caso deste episódio, que fizemos numa altura que estava muito intensa da violência policial nos Estados Unidos, e acabámos por ir ao encontro de alguns grupos que estavam a usar vídeo online, por exemplo, o Cop Watch, que é um projeto incrível em Chicago, em Nova Iorque, de comunidades maioritariamente negras, que filmam violência policial e então geram toda uma conversa sobre também como é que podes filmar de um modo seguro violência policial. Então, este episódio vem muito desse diálogo. Lá está, que é um diálogo específico também sobre o online e a distribuição de vídeos e especificidades que surgiram em termos de género e de... aqui, num campo que antes não existia desta maneira e que já se institucionalizou, de certo modo. Ou neste caso que estamos agora a fazer, que vai ser uma série de 5 episódios, em que de repente pronto, tem a ver com questões de mineração em mar profundo, que têm muito vagarosamente vindo a ser faladas, é uma ideia de extração muito recente e que neste momento, por acaso, e daí também o nosso interesse, vieram de um plano europeu de tentar fazer extração nos Açores, em mar profundo. A partir de 2019 estarão previstas as primeiras prospecções. Isto é um projeto europeu em que Portugal aceitou e achou bem, aparentemente, mas que de repente nos colocou, para falar de um caso muito específico, em conversas globais com pessoas na Papua Nova Guiné, com pessoas na Austrália, no Japão, onde esses processos de extração ou de investigação estão mais avançados. Portanto, de repente, o projeto tem-se vindo a tornar também um ponto de encontro entre várias pessoas. Mesmo nós, somos portugueses, estamos muito interessados no contexto de cá, nós não vivemos cá há muito tempo. E isso também para nós, por vezes, é como é que nós nos conseguimos conectar ou não de volta cá no nosso contexto. Sim.
Se calhar agora é um bom momento para tentar introduzir a Lara Baladi.
My name is Lara Baladi. I'm a visual artist who started with photography, my career with photography, and I live in Cairo. I'm from a Lebanese community, immigrated to Cairo 100 years ago. So I have multiple cultural backgrounds. Well, when the revolution started in Egypt in 2011, there was in fact a huge amount of visual material that was produced very quickly from the first 18 days, which were the major 18 days in Tahrir that toppled President Mubarak, until today. But from the very, very beginning, as a visual artist, I was very, very fascinated by the sort of the relationship between some of the iconography that started to appear from the uprising and the resonance it had with previous historical events, and not necessarily that had happened in Egypt, but that had happened anywhere else in the world. So I started to collect material from what I call the Vox Populi, the voice of the people on YouTube, particularly on YouTube, and which that of course can include people posting extracts from channels like Al Jazeera and others, and to collect also in parallel to this archive, to create a sort of overlook of previous events or political speeches, philosophical speeches, extract from films, all kinds of different materials that resonated with what was happening in Tahrir and what unfolded after the 18 days, such as writing the new constitution, voting, violence against women, etc. So this has been an ongoing process because it started very intuitively and instinctively, and as I very often do as an artist, I collect a lot of material, but very quickly on it became methodical and quite focused. Well, the purpose of this archive that I built on Gen 25 is that first it has changed, basically it has evolved. So the initial purpose was very personal. It was for a very personal reason, and almost as the only way I found I could at one point later process and digest what was going on and what had been going on. But of course this purpose evolves, and the more the archive grew, the more I realized that I was doing something that at one point I'd like to share with people, and that I would probably get into a space where I could also find ways to connect this archive to other archives that other people have been building on different points of entries into the material produced during the revolution and what happened during the revolution. So at this stage at which we're having this conversation, what I would like to do is many things. So one is to have it as a sort of as a piece on its own, which is an archive for people to tap into at later stages in terms of information. So very basic. But also to develop it into an art piece, so to have a sort of visually constructed timeline where I start to recognize patterns in the last 2 years, so maybe color-coded, or create a sort of visual, not so much graphic design, but something that is really using our eye to recognize events. So, if you look at censorship, you can see a sort of presence of blue dots throughout, the visual whatever I'm going to create, and that it becomes also somehow interactive, so that I want something that crosses over an artwork with an archive, with a historical. With what would you call it, a recording of a moment in history. So it's many possibilities that this has. Again, at another level, I wanted to be part of the mapping of archives on the revolution, and this I will attach it to the Arab Image Foundation's website and work, which is about collecting and archiving history of Arab photography. So I would like us to be a sort of portal for people doing research to just be able to know and locate where different archives are. And then also it's a how can I say, it's a continuous sort of process, which I think as it evolves will give possibilities into many different use. So it will continue to transform. The importance of the production of this Vox Populi, as I called it earlier, during the revolution is tremendous. I mean, I think the whole world has understood that, especially the world of photography and image making. However, it's very difficult to go through all of the different implications that this has had and still has. But one thing I think that is important to remember and to maybe go back and so that we can actually understand how this happened is that Egypt has a very high, I think, I don't know the exact number, but I would guess about 60% or maybe, I mean, a very high number of illiteracy and illiterate people. So what was very fascinating is that when the revolution started, suddenly the voices got completely liberated, and people, I think, who even don't really speak or who don't really write and read were actually using visual material as means to express themselves. And so the image suddenly took a very different role in society. And of course, in particular, in terms of documenting the uprising. What was extraordinary for me as an artist, more than as a journalist or other kind of image maker and professional, was the dam of creativity that broke. So from having a very kind of contained art scene in Egypt, and quite relatively small, suddenly there was a whole world of possibilities and also of languages that have come out of the 18 days. So I think the implications of this production was not just about the fact that we documented the event and that it will stay as an archive, and that of course all this is extremely important, but really what this meant was that people were able to exist as individuals, to reconquer their territory, to belong again, to feel like they could participate in the change that they wanted to see and that they wanted to be, that they wanted to experience from this revolution. And it's still the case. Of course, now the impact is different because the events unfold at a different pace and we're in a different process of the revolution. So, because I still think we are in a revolution, although right now it's not exactly a very successful one. So of course the production of these images was, on a global level, I think a pivotal moment in the history of photography and journalism. But on a local level, it came along with the understanding of a certain kind of freedom and the possibility of a certain kind of freedom. I think you can almost see the evolution of the use of visual material from 25th of January until today. Almost, if you look at it as a chart, you can see point 0 and then a really high, like a very high peak, and then you sort of start to get onto a platform. And I think we've reached a sort of platform where people have acquired the sense that you know, a certain sense of expression. So they feel much more, you know, overnight there was the possibility of saying things without having the risk of ending in prison or whatever. I mean, it's still, there are still huge issues in terms of what's going on with the system and the police system and all of that. However, there is still not yet a return to very extreme visual censorship and expression in terms of censorship. So yes, there is, but there is at levels that is not yet touching citizens. It's for now still attacking more directly, you know, the pyramid from the top. So the censorship that's coming back right now is aiming more at the very influential journalists or magazines or, you know, newspaper that are, of course, against the regime that exists now. And in terms of individuals, you have, I haven't really seen, I mean, there are specific attacks against activists and so on, but people are posting, everything is out and everything is exposed. So that's one thing we have gained from the revolution. I think the reason why I built the archive and how it's today tied to the exhibition I'm actually going to tomorrow to install one of my works, which is related to the archive. The reason why I did this archive originally was really because I just couldn't cope with so much information at once, and I was extremely, you know, I'm someone who's I've developed my work under a dictatorial and stagnant regime, and it was really interesting to watch how I really belong to a very different kind of speed, you know, of action. So, and because of the nature of how I work and what I do, of course, all of that. But the way I work is that I absorb, I collect, I'm a sponge, and then, you know, after a while, I find the thread between all the different layers and, you know, horizontally and vertically, and try to make sense of it. Of course, this experience is also mixed with a huge amount of emotions and personal, direct experience of the revolution, because I've been extremely engaged in what's happened in Tahrir and with Tahrir Cinema and Radio Tahrir and so on. So the archive and the work I've produced for this exhibition is, you know, the first step into sort of trying to make sense a little bit of it, or at least saying, you know, this is, let's take it from the start and let's revisit points of entry into everything that I have in front of me. So the different theories on media, the different theories on perspective, on looking, on seeing, on using photography, on virtual reality, and so on and so forth, and looking back at things while looking ahead. So this is what I try to do as a first step into, okay, what do I do with this archive? So maybe this was, you know, once this was out, you know, now there's much more space for making the archive into something I can practically give and share to other people and maybe institutions and so on. And also it's become an incredible resource for me to work from. So I've actually produced a sculpture also that's, I think, is a direct outcome of this archive.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very sorry to not be with you because the program looked very interesting and relevant to the work of Constant. So my short intervention is called No Final Cut. And it's a message from Brussels to Lisbon from Constant, an organization, an association for arts and media that's been active in Brussels since 1996. How are you doing with the slides?
Very good. You listen?
Yeah?
Yeah, perfect.
What are you seeing? What are you showing now?
Still you.
Okay.
I'm waiting
Can you maybe pull up the slides, then it's easier
I
to
can't
follow.
open them. They're not in yet.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I keep on talking. So Constant is, as I said, an association for arts and media, and we've been operating as an artist initiative since 1996, and the elements. Sorry, I can a bit like I see myself though. The different elements that cross in our program, rethinking the position of the author, feminism, and free and open source software somehow have made us interested in a form of practice that does not need a final object, a definite result. And so I wanted to quickly show you 3 projects that are not all video, but actually combine a video, image, and text. Because for us, as people involved in digital media programming, algorithmic programming, image and text are mixed media. Where am I? So I wanted to show. I wanted to start with a quote from, and I wanted to see that on screen, but that's maybe not going to happen yet. All right, I will read it to you. You can find all this material online. I included a link in the presentation, so you can find it. So it's a quote by Michael Myrtle, someone that is working with us, a computer scientist that is part of the collective, and he writes in a text called "What's Wrong with the YouTube Documentary?" Part of the of crossing video with computation is the potential to combine the computer's ability to construct models and run simulations with the random access possibilities of digitized media. Instead of editing story down into a fixed form or final cut, one can program a story system that can act as an editor in the software. So the first project I would want to show is a project developed by Peter Westenberg in the context of a series we have been developing for a few years now in relation to the moment that works enter the public domain. It's called The Death of the Authors. And in that sense, we take that literally. Because 70 years after the death of an author, their copyright expires and their work belongs to the public domain as of that moment. And to celebrate that moment, we make a new work every year. And this year, we decided to work with the paintings and drawings of a Belgian artist, Leon Spiliaert. And Peter has made a comic book based on this work. So 70 years, well, some it is a bit longer, almost a century later, this has become a digital work. I'm not showing it to you yet, I think. You're still... Almost. We'll just keep on going. I'll let you know. Yeah, okay. The second work I want to talk about is developed in the context of divergence. Divergence, it's here. Okay. Let's scroll through to the 7th slide and says divergence objects make to be. That's all right. So this work was developed in the context of a session called Divergence. Yes, we've seen it. Okay. So combining the words diversity and versioning, because we were interested in collective experiments with archiving, versioning. So think about Wikipedia, for example, where you can see the different versions of an article's becoming, and digitization. And we worked with a museum for arts and history that hosted this session. Next slide. So this is us in the museum. Next slide. So Unmountains decided to take the museum's website, where they would show their collection, and take all the metadata and into a script that would allow to somehow give the objects in the collection a voice. Next slide. This works, super. So what she wanted to do is, what she asked herself is what objects would have to say when listening to them through the catalog. And so she produced this algorithmically generated catalog of women that were present in the museum. And so each of the objects now have a voice and somehow speaks to us about where it was found, how it was, what measures, what measurements it has, etc., etc. This is a generative catalog, as it were. So each time you launch the script, a new catalog is generated. So time runs. The last two projects I wanted to show are developed in the context of active archives. That's a long-running project that started already in 2006, and it gathers all kinds of projects that are concerned with the digital archives of cultural institutions. At that time, when I think the platforms were not as powerful as they are at the moment, cultural institutions were really grappling with how to publish their material and how to make it available to the public. And so we started thinking with them, with different institutions, what tools, what licenses, what ways. And as part of that work, with Michael Myrtle, we started to develop work around video recordings of events and lectures. Because the problem with reproductions of material in cultural institutions is that they are usually legal minefields when it comes to licensing, but the video material, so when for example a conference like this happens and the video recordings are put online, are much more easier to deal with. But then how to give access, how to somehow make this material not just a recording of something that has happened before, but again available for new interpretations. So the first thing I show is Videograph. This is a very small experiment. Next slide, please. A small experiment, but we started to think about transcriptions and subtitles. So we were developing tools and practices to do transcriptions of video, and then to use these text files that are timed to video as a way to edit the material. And so what you see here is just two images from an experiment we did with the Rear Window, where we looked for the word woman in the subtitles, and then had, next slide please, had the script make an automatic edit that would take fragments that had the word woman in it. So in a way, by searching the subtitles, you could make endless new videos. That same idea was taken into what we call the Video Wiki. Next slide, please. So this was an idea to take editing into the realm of wikis. So we were interested in this idea of the software used for Wikipedia, for example, where there is this theory that readers and writers somehow have the same level of access, that the reading and writing is very close to each other. And so could we do something like that with video as well? So you hear now for us, writing and moving image are quite close to each other. So with Michael, we started to make interfaces that would allow multiple annotations, multiple taggings, that in a way, like the videograph experiment, could lead to new edits of material, but always without baking the material into a final cut. So always you would have access to the source material and could see the different interpretations of the same material next to each other. So I end with the last quote from Michael, and that explains you a bit how for us, this idea of final cut is linked to the types of work we're making, but also the types of tools we're developing. And then the last slide will be the reference to all the materials, so with a bit more time, you can have a second look. So he says, collaborative online video tools need not stay stuck in the heavy and overly precise timeline-based models of tools like Final. So you see we're referencing this proprietary tool. Software such as the Wiki are suggestive of other approaches to collaborative work online that can have useful application in the realm of comparable tools for working with video as well. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fredka. Thank you.
I really want to give my sincere thanks to Inés Zapata-Diaz and Susana Nascimento Duarte and Nina Ramos for inviting me and for organizing such an amazing event. I've really enjoyed myself tremendously and learned a lot. It's been fantastic. It's my first time in Portugal, and I'm really sure that it's not going to be my last, too. It's been a wonderful trip so far. Of course, I haven't given my paper yet, so we'll see what happens afterwards. I'm going to have to decline the kind and exciting invitation to comment on the 3 films. That's not what I prepared. I mean, I could make some comments about it, but I think I'll refrain. If I had to say one thing, I'd say that Flusser is right about the crisis of linear thinking. Angela Davis is right about the legacy of slavery being sedimented, and I would say add into the code. And yes, it's true, the United States is full of psychopaths. So that's all the comments I can offer right now on those films. I apologize. And I'm going to jump into my paper with apologies to the translators in advance. And to those of you who are listening to the translation, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but we'll just see how it works. So sorry, translator booth, here goes. The title is Derivative Living and Archival Strategy. In my seminar at the University of Portugal yesterday, entitled The Derivative Machine, Life Cut, Bundled, and Sold, I endeavored to make the argument that with the financialization of everyday life and the capture of informatic labor by ambient computation, what we call films can be increasingly understood as derivatives. Whether through the use of archival images and sound, or more commonly, the capture of new images and sounds with machines whose operating systems are derived from the archive of prior knowledge formations, what we call films cut and paste elements from life and bind them in new arrays, securitizing them as best they can with their form or genre. In these acts of composure, they are not exceptional, because with the digitization of nearly all semiotic activity by what I call computational racial capital, any particular communique, from advertising to a call to arms, can be understood as an edited composition that functions as a kind of wager. Such wagers within the image, by means of images, or more generally wagers in what is called digital culture, within information by information, are bound by principles that are equally as social as they are technical. They are expenditures of resources that might be used otherwise, designed to constellate resources that may well have other demands on them. This condition of wagering on information is not a choice. just as one does not have a choice but to live and strive on a polluted, hierarchical planet. And expressing it in these words admittedly calibrated and nuanced in alignment with my will to a certain polemical endpoint today, is radically overdetermined by the material conditions of our existence. That is, the words are overdetermined by the material conditions of our existence and the planetary subjugation of life. The financialization of everyday life means that decision, and indeed metabolism, are subject to a relentless calculus of optimization from all quarters. My speech here is a wager and an enticement to you to wager along with me by paying attention. And even though I'm asking you to valorize my wager with your attention, to execute the program of my thought with your thought, of course, I speak and write just as others make films, with the clear knowledge that the vast majority of the world will ignore me. This change in the character of the world, a world where precarity is on the rise, war has become permanent, some people are richer than the richest kings in history, and justice is scarce indeed. Our world could not have come about without the cinema. Some might be surprised to hear me say this, and to be clear, I am not saying that cinema is to blame for the financialization of everyday life, no more, at least, than is the Hollerith punch card famously used by IBM and Hitler responsible for the Holocaust. But I'm saying that the rise of screen cultures is in no way incidental to the encroachment of brutal financialization on all aspects of existence. Just as today's computational armatures are inseparable from the global organization of a world in which genocide, incarceration, forced migration, permanent war, and endemic poverty is the norm. With the rise of cinema, images outpaced words and slowly but surely imposed a paradigm of information and digitization such that expression itself became a financial instrument. That's a key point for me. The industrialization of the visual, realized by cinema's bringing of the Industrial Revolution to the eye, meant also the colonization of the mind and the senses by the new protocols of value production. Thus, the media of expression became work sites. And those of us who would express a version of ourselves, along with those of us who are forced to do so, become workers in the deterritorialized factories of the media. Without such a thesis, we cannot fully grasp the world historical significance of the rise of screens and screen cultures. Like the workers before us, and still beside us, all around us, and very likely also within us, you can feel them working away in your head, can't you? Our labor, now informatic labor, is remunerated to our disadvantage, or oftentimes it is unremunerated, just plain stolen. Some of us cooperate by dutifully consuming images and creating posts on social media. Some of us sing our laments in books, films, command performances, and gossips. Some of us just go to work, and some of us try to disconnect, while those who control the networks, either through arms, states, banks, or communications infrastructure, which are all linked in any case, exercise obscene power, also obsessive, as they ride the waves of social volatility with cold indifference and near impunity. So I'm going to just show two clips for a moment to raise a couple of issues and then continue. But if I could have the first one, which is 10 milliseconds in the Trading of Merc by Eric Hunsader. You can go ahead and hit play. No, it's a pretty boring film, but this is 10 milliseconds. The film is over 6 minutes long, and it shows just 10 milliseconds of trades being made in algorithmic trading. The time of the entire film, the 6 minutes, doesn't even cover enough time for the signal to go from London to New York, meaning to say that it's shorter than the speed of light connection between London and New York. And these are the trades that computers are making as they run their algorithms to optimize the investment. So I think that's probably enough of that. You get the idea, and it's late. I don't want to put you to sleep. The second one is a film called Squatter Punk. It's just a 3-minute clip from Carlin de la Cruz. It should be kind of, it's a DVD. It should be kind of loud. Maybe it'll wake you all up. Hopefully it'll wake me up. It's kind of intense. So that's on the outskirts of Manila, and probably you immediately realize that if you went into that water, you might die. But it's also interesting because it looks like those kids are playing in part, but they're actually gathering, they're recycling. They're gathering materials which they're going to trade in a few minutes for a few coins to buy some food. Hunsetter uses the archive of algorithmic trading to generate the animation you just saw, while Cavan treats the squats on the outskirts of Manila as a living archive, storing data about the function of global capitalism. Another way of saying digital culture. The slum is a repository of information. Both use the data generated by digital culture to make digital images. We are seeing through the digital to figure some of the unthought and perhaps unthinkable consequences of digitization. These films are derived from the archives and to a certain extent are akin to situationist dérives, psychogeographies of a new type. Now, speaking more generally about what mass media does, the movement of financialization into media of expression, that is the financialization of expressivity along the racializing and gender differentiating grid of intelligibility that functions under the cloak of everyday understandings of digital culture, is an intensification of the affective power of capital and of deployment, harnessing, and the development of the semiotics of the value form. These are certain ways of answering it in the films that we saw, but I'm going to go ahead and elaborate a little bit more about what I think is going on in the generalization of this kind of computational racial capital. This thoroughgoing assault on cultural qualities by economic quantity is an advanced stage of what Adorno and Horkheimer meant by the culture industry. However, it is not simply the mediation and therefore intelligibility. It is not simply that mediation and therefore intelligibility itself has become financialized, but that mediation and intelligibility have themselves become means of further financialization and the subsumption of formerly extra-economic domains. Media forms are deterritorialized fact areas in which spectators and now content providers work, utilizing their affective, attentional, and neuronal metabolic capacities. The convergence of media formations with computation, such that nearly all media today are effectively computational media, is also a deeper and more granular convergence with financial calculus and an ever more precise mobilization of machines and metrics of capture. Computational capital means that almost all social activity is ultimately wagered in relation to an ambient calculus of value. I mean, even what's going on in the squats of Manila. That most, if not all planetary denizens are forced to game from their statistically overdetermined locales. Therefore, the phrase that Jennifer Morgan attributes to Saidiya Hartman, the brutal calculus of self-betrayal, when used when describing a slave coffle forced to sing, where the performance commanded by the masters in exchange for survival was song, becomes, to varying degrees, the general rule for expression in computational racial capital. Our expression is an endeavor to free ourselves, wagered against a calculus of extraction that forecloses becoming. Our expression is, to use a term from finance, a hedge. I am no means conflating the general condition of the utterance with the condition of chattel slavery, but rather saying that this brutal calculus of self-betrayal is indeed imposed by the totalizing perspective of the world media system in relation to the species, in which every signal is optimized for profit-taking. No matter what you say, you make a profit for someone, almost. Expression has become a hedge, a wager, a playing of the spread opened by the volatility of the social. It has become a derivative. It is the expression of beings who have already been overcoded and marked for various forms of capture, beings who seek to impose their lot in the context of beings who seek to improve their lot in the context of a toxic, extractive sociality. As expressive beings, we are already inscribed in the informatic architecture enabled by the historical archive. The archive enables a writing upon bodies that renders them operational in various social programs. Having been spoken by the archive, we must find a way to speak through it. The consequences of and the conditions for the functioning of a system that imposes derivative living are, as currently configured, the 2 billion plus persons living on less than $2 per day, the currently enslaved, those forced into reparations seeking migration, those suffering famine, climate dissolution, genocide, and so on, as the material underside of chaos management, undertaken by the military-industrial complex, financial markets, the world media system, and what I think of as fractal fascism. To whom the brunt of the violence is delivered is determined algorithmically, stochastically, and in accord with the calculus of social difference grafted to historical violence, or what Hartman called the racial calculus and political arithmetic that was entrenched centuries ago. The calculus of racial capitalism is the result of traditional forms of racial, gendered, and nationalist exploitation becoming overlaid with developed and exacerbated by a mediological semiotic layer that signifies bodies and inscribes upon them the terms of the conditions by which they may be systemically treated, making them systemically legible and functionalized accordingly. It is, in brief, the treatment of people and peoples as writing surfaces, as commodities, as quantities, and thus today as information. It is the violent overdetermination and delimitation of people's life potentials. Like the mortgage industry's securitization of home loans that was precursor to their stripping and recombination in order to sell them as derivatives, the world media system cuts and bundles people, composing and recombining social bodies, and writing contracts on their future that can be sold in the financial markets. Given the impending, if not fully secured, foreclosure of the powers of speech and expression, and given the regular conversion of our dreams of liberation into nightmares for others, if not also for ourselves, what is the role of cinema? Those of you who are filmmakers may already have your own quests, and perhaps also your own answers. No doubt, cinema may fortify us in certain instances, the aesthetic, modes of cognition, forms of time, the particularities of unrepresented lives, and so much more, as the building blocks of counter-hegemonic understanding and solidarity. Elsewhere, with the notion of the programmable image, I have suggested that cinema and images serve as programs, scripts for perception, cognition, and practice. And inasmuch as that is true, these may also be programmed and reprogrammed from below. Cinema, then, is a site of struggle, an engine of attention aggregation that is directly involved in world-making. But in saying that cinema, in addition to functioning as a program, also functions as a derivative, that is, that it functions as an explicitly financial instrument of programming that speaks from the archive of codification through the archive of codification and thereby enters into the production and transmission of value, I am saying something more. How much time do I have? I'm over time. But I thought I had half an hour. Well, okay. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to end in a minute with and leave out the provocative stuff. I am acutely aware that with a few injunctions to filmmakers to reclaim or revoice the cinematic archive and tear apart the white supremacist heteropatriarchy, I could end this talk right here and walk away unscathed. I think I'm going to do that. Just one more little bit, just to tell you what you're missing. Nothing I've said so far is particularly controversial, but leaving things so neat would be, to me anyway, this is what I was writing earlier, a cop-out. Cinephiles, forgive me for this next elaboration, but my analysis compels me here to say that because of its relation to commodification, to codification and finance, cinema should be understood as a new order of money, money with qualities. We spend film on the world, we exchange it for the world, we circulate it in the world, and we receive it as a means to the world. We wager within the image in order to create futures. And what I was going to work out here in the rest of this paper, but I know it's quite late, is the relationship between derivatives and the wager and the possibility of consolidating attention in new forms. And while there was a couple of finer points on that, one of the places that I was going was to think about the rise of cryptocurrencies and distributed computing, which I see actually as a new kind of filmmaking. The shortest version I can give you of that is that money is also a form of attention. It's an attention machine, and the circulation of it functions very much like images. The fact that money is being taken away from national platforms and can now be on computational platforms means that participants can begin to set their own terms of valuation. We actually can write derivatives rather than letting only banks and bankers be the ones to write derivatives. I hate the financial world, I have to say that. I'm very hesitant to use these financial terms directly, but I also recognize that as radical as we might be right now, because of the information infrastructure, it functions as fixed capital. No matter what we lament, oftentimes we're just producing profit for media shareholders. In that case, we need to have monetary policy like the old socialist and communist revolutions. What this would mean would be sort of combining the cryptoeconomic design with the affective capacities of filmmakers, and really sort of taking seriously the materiality that attention produces and intensifies, and that we could perhaps create a material substrate which would consolidate this attention such that it wasn't extracted and removed from those communities that were generated by the things we normally think of as cinema or activist groups or social movements, all of which use what we call social media to organize themselves. So that's just a taste of where I was going. I apologize for the fact we ran out of time. Thank you very much for your time.